I'm the education director at the Rich Earth Institute, and we're a nonprofit based down in Brattleboro, Vermont, and we advocate for the reclamation of human urine as a fertilizer. So I'm going to share a little presentation with you today about why we think that's a kind of ecological practice that we can be engaging with, and what we do here in Brattleboro, and then what folks can do anywhere in your home gardens. Anyone who eats peas and has a potted plant or a patch of land you can fertilize can Peecycle anywhere. So let me try to get my screen share going here. Here we go. So we call this home garden education program we have Urine My Garden. So intro to Peecycling at home. And this webinar that we do is funded by the Lake Champlain Basin Program for reasons that you'll understand shortly. We kind of, oftentimes when we pee or poo in our toilets and flush them, we kind of forget what happens after that and just sort of imagine that our waste might just kind of go away. In fact, we know that our toilets are connected to either sewer or septic systems, which were, designed in history to remove organic matter and pathogens. And when they're functioning properly, they do that really well. But some things that they don't remove and often still release into their local water bodies are nutrients, as well as other contaminants, including pharmaceuticals, hormones, microplastics, and emerging contaminants, especially depending on if industrial kind of manufacturing processes are connected to our wastewater treatment plants as well. So the thing we're going to focus on today is, in particular, the question of those nutrients that our sewer systems or septic systems might be releasing into our watersheds. So in Vermont in particular, we can kind of think of it as sort of divided into two zones about which nutrients in particular we're thinking about. So here in Brattleboro and everywhere that's connected to the Connecticut River watershed, our nutrients go down the Connecticut River to the Long Island Sound, where nitrogen is the primary kind of nutrient of concern when we think about nutrient pollution. And then up in the Lake Champlain watershed, phosphorus, of course, is the big nutrient pollution concern up there. In Lake Champlain. So wastewater treatment plants in that watershed contribute to about 5% of the total phosphorus pollution up there. And there is kind of expensive nutrient removal technology that plants can have to upgrade the wastewater treatment plant and kind of remove those nutrients sort of after the fact of the flushing. But that's a kind of very energy intensive and expensive technology to implement. And then, of course, there are many septic systems that also kind of leach their nutrients into groundwater, which then carry those nutrients to our water bodies as well. And Vermont is kind of unique in the nation as being one of the highest proportion septic system states in the country. So we have a particular problem with trying to figure out how to prevent this nutrient pollution from happening with the septic systems as well. And so then once these nutrients accumulate in our water bodies, they then fertilize harmful algal blooms, which can then produce neurotoxins that can accumulate in shellfish and have all kinds of different ecological ramifications, including producing mass fish kills, and also kind of having negative effects on, for example, like dogs swimming in the water can have neurological effects, et cetera. So not a great kind of journey for our nutrients to become this source of pollution, either in our fresh water bodies or our coastal water areas. So we kind of think of this as part of what we call the linear nutrient flow. So on the one hand, on the left, you'll see we're, capturing nutrients largely through the Haber-Bosch process for nitrogen in particular to fertilize plants. And, that step is very energy intensive and contributes about 2% to global greenhouse gas emissions. And then for phosphorus, a lot of that is mined and kind of transported over long distances to ultimately grow the food that we eat. And then the nutrients that our bodies don't need to grow, we kind of pass out in the form of largely urine. And then we flush that in clean, potable water. So we've estimated that just to flush urine alone, we waste 960 billion gallons of clean water every year. just by flushing our toilets. And so then we send that large amount of water and small amount of nutrients and waste to wastewater treatment plants, which are very energy intensive and expensive, or to our septic systems, and then those nutrients journey on to become this source of pollution. So what we advocate for at the Rich Earth Institute is reclaiming our urine and our nutrients as a resource rather than as a pollutant, and kind of reconnecting the dots of this kind of age-old cycle that humans, throughout history have kind of been connected in, where we can, reclaim our waste as part of this cycle that can then grow more food and feed our communities and sustain our communities in perpetuity. So we've calculated that every day, the average human body produces enough urine fertilizer to grow the wheat required to have enough flour to bake one loaf of bread. And I think this is just kind of a lovely way to visualize the sort of relationship of reciprocity that we can be in with the land, where the land feeds us enough to sort of sustain ourselves, and then we can kind of in turn return those nutrients to the land to grow more food. And kind of build more sustainable communities that way. So why focus on urine alone in particular? Well, you'll see on the far left that urine makes up just a tiny sliver of the total volume that makes up wastewater, but it contains a vast majority of the nitrogen and the phosphorus. So by doing a relatively small act of volume-wise of diverting the urine, we can have a pretty big impact on helping to prevent that downstream nutrient pollution, and a big impact on kind of reclaiming a fertilizer for local farms and gardens. But you'll see on the far right that it does contain about half of the micropollutants. And what this is the pharmaceuticals or other compounds that come out in urine. So I have a few slides here where I'll kind of explain our thinking about the journey of those pharmaceuticals and what happens to them. So when we flush our toilets, those pharmaceuticals are kind of sent through whatever wastewater system we're connected to, and largely aren't removed and end up accumulating in those downstream water bodies along with the nutrients. And there they have all kinds of kind of damaging ecological effects on the species that are living down there. There's all kinds of headlines you'll see of research folks have done on changing behavior in fish and kind of causing frogs to grow additional legs and all kinds of bizarre effects. So that's kind of not a great journey for the pharmaceutical residues in our urine. So the alternate is to reclaim our urine as a fertilizer, where we can protect those sensitive aquatic ecosystems downstream, and the soil microbes actually kind of have a chance to help break down the pharmaceuticals before they kind of can go any further. So this is an area that Rich Earth has researched for about 6 years in partnership with the University of Michigan and the University of Buffalo to understand what exactly does happen to the pharmaceuticals in our urine when we use it as a fertilizer. And so they looked at groundwater samples, soil samples, and crop tissue samples. And basically they found that sort of, as I said, soil microbes seem to be breaking down the pharmaceuticals, and they really aren't present in the crop tissue at any kind of concerning level. The kind of facts they came up with to communicate the tiny levels that they detected in the crop tissue was that you'd have to eat about a pound of urine fertilized lettuce every day for 2,000 years to get the equivalent of 2 cups of coffee worth of caffeine. So really tiny and kind of quite comparable to sort of the background levels of contaminants that just kind of exist in the world that we live in now. But it's something that we're continuing to research, and also looking into like charcoal filtration as a way to further filter contaminants out of urine. All right, so now I'll kind of tell you a little bit about sort of what we talk about as the 2 scales of peecycling that one can be engaged in. The first is the one on the bottom, which is what we call the community scale urine nutrient reclamation program, where people can collect in their homes and bring it to centralized locations where we then process it and then bring to local farms. And then I'll tell you a little bit about how one can urine fertilize in your own home garden to help protect your watershed that way. So this is a photo of one of our farm partners applying urine fertilizer to his hay field. And we've been doing this for about a decade now. We're going on our 11th year of partnering with local farms. Down here in Brattleboro, we've been operating this program, which is the first and largest urine nutrient recycling program of its kind in the States. And it's a demonstration program that really serves as a platform for our research and education. And we're hoping to kind of replicate this community model in other communities, sort of like how towns will have a municipal recycling or compost program. We think that municipal Peecycling can be a good part of that sustainable package. So we have about 230 local urine donors who contribute their liquid gold to our program. And they're motivated by kind of a wide range of factors, including the water conservation benefits, the ability to prevent that downstream pollution, and the ability to support local farmers in a really kind of unique way by providing them with a free fertilizer. And I think it's just a unique way to kind of feel a part of the landscape in a really intimate way that's different from other kinds of sustainable practices. It kind of changes how you think about yourself and the landscape a little bit, at least in my experience. We've done a variety of different agricultural research trials over the years. One of the early ones we did was comparing urine fertilizer to synthetic fertilizer, and showed that it did indeed increase the hay yield compared to the synthetic fertilizer. So it does work just as well, and has been kind of shown to continue to do that over the years. And since then, we've partnered with a wide variety of other farmers growing different crops, including corn and hemp and flowers and figs and a whole bunch of different things. So how do people go about collecting their urine? There's kind of a wide range of different options. People will, everything from as simple as a yogurt container or a laundry detergent bottle to these urine diverting toilets on the far right, which we offer local installations of. And then we'll come around with our truck and kind of pump out people's basements from the barrels of urine that they've collected. And then in the middle here is the Peecycling kit that we provide to local folks, which is basically a 5-gallon or 2.5-gallon jug with a funnel attachment that's totally watertight. It's kind of a cool fact to imagine how much clean water you're preventing from being flushed by collecting your urine in a dry container. So every full 5-gallon container of urine is conserving an average of 100 gallons of water from being wasted. So it might look like a small amount that you're doing, but you're having a big impact in terms of saving all of that water. All right, so now I'm going to kind of shift gears and talk a little bit about what the experience of doing this might look like in your own home, not connected to our Brattleboro community program. So we have these little Peecycling kits available, and anyone interested in the Lake Champlain region is eligible to get one shipped to you from us for free for a suggested donation of $45, but kind of pay what you can. And I'll have more information about that at the end. But basically how these kits work is we have a little ball. We've actually upgraded from the ping pong ball to a ball pit ball now. So a little more colorful and a little more effective. And basically that just works as a valve check so that your urine can pass through and it prevents air and odor from escaping. And then we also recommend adding white vinegar to the container before you start collecting, which also helps prevent odor from being an issue. And most folks, report not having odor be an issue if you do those two steps combined. And then if you're just fertilizing in your own home garden, the World Health Organization guidelines say that you actually don't need to worry about sanitizing your urine, because as long as it's just urine itself is largely sterile. And as long as you know you're a healthy individual, then it's totally safe to use in your garden that way. This is the actual NPK analysis of urine. So you can use this to think about how you might use it as a fertilizer. And this 0.6, 0.1, 0.2 NPK is something we've calculated based on our typical kind of urine collected from our community program. So to think about that differently, a gallon of urine contains about 0.05 pounds of nitrogen and these smaller levels of phosphorus and potassium. So we really kind of recommend using it based on the nitrogen recommendations, because nitrogen is such a large proportion of urine fertilizer. So we recommend applying to your plants when they're actively growing. and generally when they're in their greatest nitrogen uptake stage. So sometime when between older than a seedling and younger than a fruiting or flowering plant, kind of in this middle zone here. And generally fertilizing plants that are nitrogen loving. So tomatoes, corn, brassicas, anything that has high nitrogen needs is a great recipient for urine fertilizer. And then you can, again, kind of calculate how much you want to apply sort of based on a number of factors, including the nitrogen needs of your plant. And then also if you want to kind of get scientific about it, you can do soil tests and send them to your local state extension service and find out what the nutrient content of your soil already is and calculate how much additional urine you want to apply based on that. Another rough kind of rule of thumb we've developed is applying about 1 gallon of urine per 100 square feet every couple of weeks is sort of a rough way to think of it. And then to actually apply, there are kind of just a few main things we recommend thinking about. One is you want to minimize any spraying so that you don't lose the nitrogen as ammonia. So just try to pour it as close to the ground as possible. And then we recommend incorporating it into moist soil, either by covering the urine over with moist soil or watering your garden immediately afterward. And then also diluting the urine is another good way to make sure it gets incorporated. So you can, before you fertilize, mix the urine with 3 to 5 parts water. And then that will make sure it doesn't over apply to your plants and also incorporates into the soil. Another thing you can do is add your urine to compost. This is particularly beneficial if you have a very high carbon content compost. If you have a lot of like green material in your compost, like food scraps, then it won't retain the urine as well. So it's kind of a game of figuring out what that balance is. And then we have a survey that we ask folks to take to kind of help us grow the knowledge base about how folks are doing this in their home gardens. We can share the link to that after. It's also, tinyurl.com/urinmygarden2023. And we're really interested in learning both like how people are doing this, what other soil amendments you're using, and also like how you're talking about it with other people, because it's kind of a new thing that people are coming out in the open and sharing these practices. And we're really interested to learn what different kind of reception and ways of thinking about it are. These are some of the responses we've had from our survey about how gardens respond to urine fertilizer. Some of the interesting things we've been learning from the survey are that there seems to be a potential kind of secondary benefit of fertilizing with urine that is kind of deterring insect or rodent predation. So we don't kind of have any like thorough scientific research behind that, but it definitely is something that people are reporting, which is really cool to learn. As I mentioned earlier, these Peecycling kits are available to anyone in the Lake Champlain Basin region. If you just shoot me an email and explain that you're planning to use this to fertilize your garden, we can ship them up to you. And there's kind of different heights and different accoutrements to make it possible for different folks to pee into them and use them as a fertilizer device. And they also come with a little spout that affixes to the cap so that you can pour them with kind of minimal splashing, etc. We also sell them on Etsy to other folks outside of the region, and we have a DIY video on our YouTube page. And then we have a Facebook group we're starting so that folks can connect and kind of share what they're learning in a more informal way. And that's just called Urine My Garden. You can find that on our page also. So that's the end of my presentation. This is my kind of final inspirational message to leave you with, which is that anyone can be the change you wish to see in the world by urine fertilizing in your own garden. And yeah, I think we have time for a few questions now, if anyone has them. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julia. I'll just ask if anyone has any questions, you can type them in the chat if you don't want to talk, and I can read them out for you, or if you'd like to raise your little hand, you can also ask them directly too.
Can I ask you a question about state law and what I know that it feels like even in Vermont, our laws are very sort of anti-composting toilet. Like if you're using a compost toilet by law and you tell anyone about it, seems like it's better not to, that you have to throw that in the trash. Are there regulations that don't allow for Peecycling?
Oh, that's a great question. We actually have a webinar we're doing at noon tomorrow that's sort of all about compost toilet law.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Definitely recommend checking that out.
Okay.
Basically, just a note about the compost toilet regulation thing is that in Vermont, you're allowed to have a compost toilet, but you're not allowed to compost the solids of that toilet to then reuse in your garden as a fertilizer source.
Which doesn't, yeah.
We have a couple bills in the House currently that are hoping to change that. It's H163 and H164. Okay. If you're interested in looking it up. But for urine, as long as you store the urine in containers smaller than 5 gallons or smaller, they're kind of outside of the jurisdiction of the state, and it's totally allowable to use it in your home garden. Okay. Just if you have a larger barrel than 5 gallons, currently the state regulates those as wastewater holding tanks. So we pioneered a new innovative alternative permitting pathway so that our local urine donors who have these larger barrels can have large barrels of urine that we can then pump out. But we're also working on figuring out easier permitting pathways for that as well.
That would be great. It just perplexes me that we're all okay with buying bags of cow manure at the hardware store and spreading that on fields, but have this like aversion to our own, waste matter. So yeah. Thank you. Yeah, no, this is great.
Yeah, John.
Are you aware that JPeak has, at least I can only speak for the men's rooms, some places where there are no flush toilets, no flush urinals. I don't know what they do with it, but it might seem as a good possibility if you could find out. You might have a good source up in this area.
What was the place you said?
JPeak Resort.
JPeak Resort. Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to look into that. We definitely, the whole kind of frontier of waterless urinals is, amazing way to collect urine. We've been kind of long having our eyes on the Welcome Center way down in our neck of the woods on 91, which has lots of waterless urinals also.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea where that goes, but they've had them there for, I'm thinking 12 years now, somewhere around that.
Wow.
Yeah. You don't think they use it to make snow, do you, John?
I can tell you honestly that I recognize yellow snow. And I've only seen it produce trail side.
Nice.
Julia, have you had much engagement with folks up here? Have you had people requesting your kits at all, or is this?
Yeah, slowly but surely. Yeah, I did a presentation with 350 Burlington, and a few folks from there requested some. Yeah, I'm also going up at the end of April. I'm doing an in-person one at Shelburne Farm. So if anyone wants to come see me then, I'll have some there that you can pick up also. Yeah.
And you had said, I think one of the slides said you collect from 230 homes in the Brattleboro area. Is that correct? Are you guys grow that, or are you maxed out?
Yeah, we're definitely trying to grow that. We just launched a new depot up in Bellows Falls, which is like half an hour north of us. So we have around like a dozen people up there, and we're trying to get more people doing that one. That one's at the recycling center there, and they don't have curbside pickup in Bellows Falls, so everyone has to go to the recycling center anyway. So we say, just bring your Peecycling and your recycling. But yeah, definitely trying to grow our kind of local urine donor base down here. Yeah.
I don't think that's called a depot. I think that's called a peepo, right?
Yes.
Come on, let's just stick with the.
Yes, I believe that is the correct terminology.
Yeah, you should make the rounds with the food co-ops too. I think that Vermont has more food co-ops per capita than any other state in the United States.
Oh, wow.
And I think that I know City Market in Burlington does, I know you just did 350 Burlington, but they do an awful lot of classes in person and online. Middlebury does, Hunger Mountain does. And I bet they'd welcome a conversation about Peecycling.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Thanks. Yeah.
Co-op members are your people.
Our peers.
Right. I see some t-shirts in the future. More t-shirts.
Oh yeah.
Julie, I have a question about you mentioned that Vermont has the most something about the most septic systems in the country or something.
Yeah, I think it's like the highest rate per capita, sort of like the food co-op stat.
I suppose because of the rural nature and not tied into town and city. Okay.
Yeah, and so that's actually like kind of an increasing problem in Vermont, where you have, this kind of climate resilient goal of having compact village settlement, but then you don't have like the space for the wastewater treatment to kind of accept that greater housing. So we're really interested in promoting like on-site composting and gray water recycling as a kind of green alternative to allow that kind of smart growth to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Julia, thanks. Great presentation. I was just curious if you could explain, maybe I missed it when you talked about it, but I was surprised to see that the diluted urine was better for hay production than the undiluted.
Yeah, I think that was it kind of a slight, I mean, the error bars on that I think are such that it's not kind of totally one way or the other, but I think the dilution sort of just helps it incorporate into the soil and maybe helps prevent some of the ammonia volatilization from being as much of an issue, because the more that urine ends up being exposed to the air, you lose some of the nitrogen value of it. I think might be the reason behind that. But the full report on that study is on our website under publications if you want to kind of check out the details of it.